It wasn't the first time she had stayed out late, but it was the first time I felt truly alone. The house was quiet that night, eerily so. The clock ticked steadily, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the kitchen. I sat at the dining table, staring at the empty chair across from me. The chair where she should have been, but wasn't. I don't know when I first started noticing it, but somewhere along the way, that chair began to feel more and more vacant. She'd been coming home later and later, and when she did, she wasn't herself. At first, I told myself it was work. Or maybe she was just tired. But as the weeks went by, I couldn't deny the distance growing between us. It wasn't that she was angry or distant in a confrontational way. No, it was worse. It was like she was fading away. I'd ask her what was wrong, and she'd smile, say everything was fine, then quickly change the subject. But the silence between us had started to fill the spaces where words once lived. That night, she wasn't even home by midnight. The thought crossed my mind to text her, to ask where she was, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the dread in the pit of my stomach. Maybe it was because I didn't want to know the answer. I pushed myself to get up from the table, grabbing my phone from the counter and scrolling aimlessly. The minutes dragged on. By 2 a.m., the house felt suffocating. I tried to distract myself with a show I didn't even care about, but my thoughts kept drifting back to her. Was she okay? Was she with someone else? The questions wouldn't leave, but I refused to ask them out loud. I didn't want to hear the answer. I'd gotten used to the late-night texts and missed calls, but there was something about the silence that night that was different. The house was quiet, but in that stillness, I could hear the cracks forming between us, the quiet collapse of something I couldn't put back together. Finally, at 3:45 a.m., I heard the front door creak open. I didn't hear her voice. I didn't hear any sound of her trying to tiptoe inside as she usually did when she came back from one of her late nights. It was almost like she was trying to sneak back in, but couldn't quite do it right. The door shut softly, and then there was nothing. I waited. Waited for her footsteps. Waited for the sound of her coming upstairs, but there was just silence. Then, after what felt like hours, I heard the faintest sound of her breathing at the foot of the stairs. She didn't come up right away, and that's when I realized. She was waiting for me to say something. And I didn't. I couldn't. What was I supposed to say? I knew something was off, but I didn't have the courage to ask her about it. Maybe if I didn't say anything, it would all just go away. Maybe she'd return to normal. Finally, she came up to the bedroom. She didn't even look at me. She didn't say a word. Just slid under the covers, facing away from me, her body stiff and cold. I could feel the space between us growing wider. I didn't ask her where she'd been. I didn't ask her if she was okay. I didn't ask because I already knew. But as the night stretched on, sleep didn't come easy. My mind was awake with questions, with doubts, with fears. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening that I wasn't privy to, something she wasn't telling me. And in the quiet, I wondered if she ever would. In the morning, she was already gone. Another typical morning. Except this time, there was no goodbye. No kiss on the cheek. Just an empty space where she should have been. I tried to ignore the feeling that gnawed at my insides. I had no idea what was coming, what she was hiding, but I would soon find out. And when the truth finally came to light, I'd realized that all those nights I'd spent waiting for her to come home had been more than just waiting for her footsteps. They had been the last moments of a life I had thought I knew. By the time I woke up the next morning, she was already gone. It wasn't unusual for her to leave early. Olivia had always been a morning person, full of energy, always busy with work. But there was something different about the way she left today. No kiss, no goodbye, just the sound of the door clicking shut behind her. The silence that followed felt unsettling, more pronounced than usual. I had gotten used to the quiet mornings over the past few months. Mornings where we exchanged nothing more than brief pleasantries before she left for work. It had become a routine I didn't even question anymore. But today, something gnawed at me, a sense of foreboding that wouldn't go away. I spent the day pacing around the house, trying to distract myself. I cleaned the kitchen, reorganized the living room, and even did laundry, things that kept my mind busy, but not enough to stop thinking about her. There was this unsettling feeling in my gut, like something wasn't right. I had always been the type of guy who ignored his instincts, but this time, it was hard to ignore. It felt like the calm before a storm. I thought about reaching out to her, sending her a text to check in, but I stopped myself. What was I going to say? Hey, how's your day going? As if everything was normal. as if I didn't feel this creeping suspicion that had started to infect my every thought. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being left behind, or worse, that I was being kept in the dark about something that mattered. When she finally came home that evening, I was sitting in the same spot on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. She looked the same as always, put together, calm, composed, but there was something in her eyes that made my stomach twist. It was almost like she wasn't entirely there. Her gaze flickered toward me for just a second before she quickly looked away, as if she didn't want me to see something in her face that I wasn't supposed to. "Hey," I said quietly, trying to make myself sound casual. "How was your day?" She shrugged, walking past me toward the kitchen. "Busy, you know how it is." I didn't respond. I watched as she moved around the kitchen, opening the fridge and grabbing a bottle of water, her movements quick, almost mechanical. She didn't even look at me when she spoke again. "I'm going to bed early tonight," she said, her voice distant, almost as if she was talking to herself. "All right," I muttered, my voice barely above a whisper. I wasn't sure what to say anymore. It was like I had lost the ability to communicate with her in any meaningful way. She disappeared upstairs, and I was left alone in the silence. The weight of the situation pressed down on me. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, a gnawing anxiety that wouldn't go away. The hours passed slowly, each minute stretching into an eternity. I waited for her to come back down, but she never did. It wasn't until around 2 a.m. that I heard her footsteps. I wasn't asleep yet, but I had been lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for something, anything, to happen. The door to the bedroom creaked open, and she slipped into bed without saying a word. Her body was stiff, tense, like she was trying to be as quiet as possible. I turned to face her, but she kept her back to me, as though she couldn't bear to face me. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly, though I didn't want to admit that I was nervous. She didn't answer at first, and the silence between us grew thicker. Finally, she sighed. "I told you, work stuff. Just need some rest, okay?" I felt a chill creep up my spine. Her words were so rehearsed, so empty, like she had said them 1,000 times before. But the look in her eyes was different. There was something else there, something that didn't belong. It was as if she was hiding something from me. I didn't ask anything more. I didn't press her. Instead, I turned over and pretended to fall asleep. But sleep didn't come easy. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her. Losing her to something I couldn't see, couldn't even name. By morning, she was already gone again, off to work, leaving me to wonder if she would ever come back the same way. And when I checked my phone, there was a new message waiting for me. It was from her, but it wasn't like the usual text she sent. It was short, almost abrupt. "Don't worry about me. Please." I stared at the words for a long time, trying to make sense of them, trying to understand what she was trying to tell me. But nothing made sense. Not anymore. The more I thought about it, the more the pieces of the puzzle refused to fit. I didn't want to admit it, but I had to. I was scared. Scared of what she was doing, scared of what was happening between us, and most of all, scared of what would happen if I found out the truth. I didn't know it then, but that simple message was the beginning of everything unraveling. The beginning of me finally understanding what had been happening right in front of me, something I had refused to see for far too long. The next few days passed in a blur. Olivia's behavior continued to grow more distant, more erratic. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong. I started to notice little things, a missed call here, a text left unanswered there. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was busy, maybe she was stressed. But as the days wore on, the distance between us only seemed to grow. There was no more casual conversation, no more laughter over a cup of coffee. We existed in the same house, but I felt like I was living with a stranger. It was on the 5th night of this odd silence when I finally snapped. I had spent the evening sitting alone in the living room, staring at the same spot on the wall, my mind racing with questions. Why was she acting like this? Where had she been going? Who was she talking to? I could feel the tension building inside me, a pressure in my chest that I couldn't ignore any longer. She was due to be home by now, but there was no sign of her. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my phone and sent her a simple message. "Where are you?" It was a question I had asked myself 1,000 times in the past few days, but tonight, I needed an answer. The reply came quickly, but it was not at all what I was expecting. "I'm with someone. Please, don't make this harder than it needs to be." I stared at the screen, my heart dropping into my stomach. Someone. The word hung in the air, echoing in my mind. The reality of it hit me like a ton of bricks, and for a moment, I was paralyzed. Was this it? Was she finally telling me the truth? I felt my hands tremble as I typed out a response, my fingers moving on their own. Who is it? There was a pause, and then she replied, I don't want to hurt you. Just trust me. Trust her? How could I trust her after everything? After weeks of feeling this creeping suspicion, after the lies, the excuses, and the avoidance, how was I supposed to trust her now? But I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say. I just stared at the words on the screen, unable to shake the feeling that the world was crumbling around me. I waited, but Olivia didn't come home that night, and the empty space beside me in our bed felt colder than ever before. I lay awake for hours, wondering who she was with, where she had been, and why she hadn't been honest with me. It wasn't just the physical absence of her that bothered me. It was the emotional distance. It was the feeling that we were no longer on the same page, no longer a team. We were strangers, coexisting in the same house, but worlds apart. The next morning, I woke up to an empty house once again. No note, no message, just silence. I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to know what was going on, had to find out where this was leading. I made a decision. I was going to follow her. I didn't know what I expected to find, but I knew I couldn't keep living in this limbo. I needed the truth, even if it shattered everything. I waited until she left for work, which was earlier than usual. I grabbed my keys and followed her car from a distance, trying to stay inconspicuous. My heart was pounding as I drove through the quiet streets, keeping a steady distance behind her. She turned down an unfamiliar road, one I didn't recognize, and I followed her without thinking. The road led to a small, nondescript building, an office complex, maybe? I wasn't sure, but it wasn't the kind of place I expected to find her. My mind raced with possibilities. Was she meeting someone here? Was this her work she had been so vague about? Or was there something else going on that I couldn't even comprehend? I parked my car down the street, out of sight, and waited. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I couldn't believe I was doing this, but I had to know. I had to know the truth. After about 20 minutes, Olivia came out of the building. She was talking to someone, a man I had never seen before. They were standing close, too close. And then, as if in slow motion, she leaned in and kissed him. I couldn't breathe. The world around me seemed to blur, the sounds of the street fading into the background. There was a moment where everything stood still, and I could only see the image of her with him, her lips pressed against his. It felt like time had stopped, like I had been punched in the chest. She pulled away from him, smiled, and got into her car. The man stood there for a moment, watching her drive away, before he turned and walked back into the building. I didn't move for a long time. I just sat there, staring at the spot where Olivia had kissed him, unable to process what I had just witnessed. It felt like my entire world had been turned upside down. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I had built my life around, had just betrayed me in a way I couldn't have imagined. I didn't know what to do next. I couldn't go back to that empty house, knowing what I now knew. I couldn't pretend that everything was fine when I felt like I was living in a nightmare. But I had no choice. I had to face her. I had to confront her and find out why she had been lying to me, why she had kept this secret hidden from me for so long. I wasn't prepared for the answer, but I was going to get it, no matter what. The drive back home felt like an eternity. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, my mind racing in 1,000 directions, none of them making sense. I couldn't believe what I had seen. Olivia had kissed another man. Another man. The phrase echoed in my mind, over and over, like a mantra I couldn't shake. The images of them together, the way she had leaned in, the intimacy between them, wouldn't leave me. It wasn't just the kiss. It was the fact that she had been hiding something from me for God knows how long. How long had this been going on? Was it just a one-time thing, or had it been going on for months? I parked the car outside our house, but I didn't get out right away. I sat there for a long time, staring at the front door. My stomach was in knots, my heart heavy in my chest. I didn't know what I was supposed to do now. Confront her? Yell at her? Ask her to explain? But what could she possibly say? What could make any of this okay? Eventually, I forced myself out of the car. My legs felt like they were made of lead as I walked toward the door, each step heavier than the last. I opened the door slowly, trying to make as little noise as possible, though I knew it wouldn't matter. She'd be home soon. She always came back around this time, her routine so predictable, so carefully orchestrated. I heard the sound of the garage door opening, and then the quiet hum of her car pulling into the driveway. There was no turning back now. I took a deep breath and waited. The door clicked open, and she stepped inside, her face lighting up when she saw me. She always had that smile for me, the smile that used to melt my heart, the one that made everything feel right in the world. But tonight, I couldn't return it. I couldn't pretend everything was fine. "Hey," she said, her voice a little too high-pitched, like she was trying to cover something up. "How was your day?" "Don't play dumb, Olivia," I said before I could stop myself. The words came out sharper than I intended. "I saw you." Her smile faltered for just a second, but it was enough for me to know that she knew exactly what I was talking about. She knew, and she was trying to cover it up. She walked past me, pretending to be unaffected, but I saw her shoulders stiffen as she passed. I followed her into the living room, my heart pounding. "You kissed him, Olivia." "I saw it. I saw everything." Her face went pale, and for a moment, she didn't speak. She just stood there, staring at me like a deer caught in headlights, and for the first time in days, I could see the crack in her composure. She was breaking, but still, she said nothing. I took a step closer. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. It was a simple question, but it felt like the weight of the world was behind it. "How long has this been going on? And why the hell didn't you tell me?" She finally looked at me, and I saw the tears welling up in her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words didn't come out right away. Her lips trembled as she fought to find something, anything, to say. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. "I never wanted you to find out like this. But I didn't know how to tell you." "How long, Olivia?" The question was almost too painful to ask, but I had to know. I had to understand what had been happening behind my back. "How long have you been seeing him?" She closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, as if trying to maintain some semblance of control. "A few months," she said softly. "It started when I started feeling like you didn't need me anymore. We grew apart, and I didn't know how to fix it. He was there when I needed someone." Her words hit me like a slap to the face. "A few months?" I repeated, my voice shaking with disbelief. "That's how long this has been going on. You've been seeing him behind my back for months, and you never thought to talk to me about it? About us?" She looked down, her hands wringing together. "I didn't know how," she whispered. "I didn't know what to say. I thought if I kept pretending everything was fine, I could figure it out. But I couldn't. And now here we are." "Here we are," I repeated bitterly. The realization hit me hard. Everything I thought I knew about our marriage, about her, was a lie. She had been living this double life, and I had been too blind to see it. The worst part was, she wasn't even sorry in the way I had expected. There was no guilt in her eyes, no regret. Just an emptiness. I couldn't look at her anymore. I turned away and walked to the window, trying to collect myself. The pain was overwhelming, and I had no idea how to process it. How could I move forward from this? Could we ever go back to the way things were? Or was it too late? "I didn't want to hurt you," Olivia said, her voice shaking now. "I never meant for this to happen. I never wanted to be this person." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because the truth was, I didn't know who she was anymore. The woman I had loved, the woman I thought I knew, was gone. And in her place was someone I didn't recognize. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was thick and suffocating, like a heavy weight pressing down on us both. The air felt heavy with unsaid words, with things that had been hidden for far too long. And in that silence, I realized something. I wasn't sure I wanted to know the rest of the story. Because the more I learned, the more I would have to face the painful truth. And I wasn't sure I was ready for that. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. Olivia stood there, her body tense, her hands trembling slightly. I couldn't bring myself to look at her. Every time I did, I felt like I was drowning in betrayal. The woman I had shared my life with, my hopes, my dreams, she was standing in front of me, but she was no longer the same person. I could see the cracks in her facade now, the guilt in her eyes that she tried so hard to hide, but it wasn't enough. The truth was already out. I turned away, my hands gripping the edge of the counter. I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me, crushing me. The last few months, the nights she came home late, the way she'd pulled away emotionally, it all made sense now. It had been building up, slowly but surely. until it all came crashing down in one single moment. And I hadn't even seen it coming. So what now? I asked quietly, my voice colder than I intended. What do we do now, Olivia? Do we just pretend this never happened? Pretend everything is fine? She took a hesitant step toward me, but I held up my hand to stop her. Don't. Don't try to comfort me. Don't make excuses. I can't hear it anymore. Her face fell, and she seemed to shrink in on herself. I don't know what to say, she whispered. I didn't want this to happen, but I don't know how to fix it. I turned back toward her, my chest tight with anger and hurt. You don't know how to fix it? I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow. How about you start by being honest with me? By telling me everything, not hiding behind half-truths and excuses. I didn't want to hurt you, she pleaded, her voice cracking. I didn't want this to get out of control. I didn't want to lose you, but I was so lost. I thought I could fix it, that I could fix us on my own, but it got too complicated. And now I've destroyed everything. Her words didn't reach me. They felt like empty promises, like things she said because she thought it would make everything better, but nothing could make it better now. I was numb, my mind racing through every memory, every moment we had shared, only to realize how much of it had been built on a lie. The betrayal wasn't just the kiss. It was everything that had led up to it. It was the emotional distance she had put between us, the way she had let me live in this false sense of security while she was living another life. I can't believe you, I said, my voice shaking. I can't believe you've been hiding this from me for so long. How could you do this to us? To me? She stood there, tears streaming down her face, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. She wasn't the person I thought she was anymore. The woman I loved was gone, replaced by someone I didn't even recognize. She wasn't the victim here. I was. For a long moment, we just stood there, the weight of everything between us. I could hear the ticking of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, but all I could feel was the emptiness. I had no idea what to do, what to say, how to fix any of this. I couldn't even look at her the same way. Everything had changed in the blink of an eye. I need to think, I said, my voice quieter now, as if I was speaking to myself more than to her. I need to figure out what I'm supposed to do. I can't be here, pretending like everything is okay. Olivia opened her mouth to say something, but I didn't let her. No, I said, shaking my head. I need space. I need time to think. I can't deal with this right now. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the room, heading for the front door. I grabbed my jacket from the hallway and stepped out into the cool night air. I didn't know where I was going, but I had to leave. I needed distance from her, from the house, from everything. I felt like I was suffocating in there. I walked aimlessly, the streets empty and quiet, my footsteps echoing in the silence. My mind was a blur of emotions: anger, hurt, confusion. I kept telling myself that I wasn't the victim here, but everything felt like a betrayal. Olivia had shattered my world, and I didn't know how to piece it back together. After hours of walking, I found myself standing outside a small bar. The neon sign flickered in the distance, its light casting a soft glow on the street. I didn't know why, but I walked in. The inside was dimly lit, the kind of place that smelled of cheap beer and stale air. It was quiet, save for a couple of people sitting at the bar. I took a seat at a table in the corner, trying to calm the whirlwind inside my head. I ordered a drink, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe I just needed to feel something. I wasn't sure how long I sat there, staring at the glass in front of me, but eventually, I felt a presence next to me. A man sat down, looking at me curiously. I didn't know him, but something about him made me feel like he understood. You look like you're carrying the weight of the world, he said, his voice low. I didn't respond right away, but after a moment, I found myself speaking, spilling everything that had been swirling inside me for days. The lies, the betrayal, the confusion. He didn't interrupt, just listened. Maybe that's what I needed most. Someone to listen, someone to understand the storm that had taken over my life. I don't know what to do anymore, I said, my voice cracking. I thought I knew her, but now everything's just gone. The man nodded slowly. Sometimes, the hardest part is accepting that you can't change it, he said, his voice full of understanding. The hardest part is letting go, even when it hurts more than anything else. Letting go. The words echoed in my mind, and for the first time in days, I considered it. Maybe it was time to let go of everything. The woman I thought I knew, the life I thought I had. Maybe it was time to stop pretending that things could go back to the way they were. But the question lingered in my mind. Could I? Could I let go of the past, of everything that had once been so important to me? Or would I spend the rest of my life haunted by the memory of what had been lost? I didn't have the answer yet, but I knew this much. Things were never going to be the same again. The next few days passed in a haze, a blur of uncertainty and anger. I couldn't find any peace, and no matter how hard I tried to distract myself, it felt like I was carrying a weight that I couldn't shake off. Olivia's absence was a constant reminder of everything that had happened, and I couldn't escape it. The house felt emptier than it ever had before. The spaces that used to be filled with laughter, with quiet conversations, with the hum of our daily routines, now echoed with silence. It was like the very foundation of our life together had crumbled beneath my feet. I tried reaching out to her a few times, but each time, I stopped myself. What was the point? What could I possibly say to her now that would make any of this better? I didn't know what I was looking for. An apology? An explanation? It wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't undo the hurt or the betrayal. Then, one evening, as I sat in the dimly lit living room, the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but something told me it was Olivia. Without thinking, I answered. "Hello," I said, my voice hoarse, unsure of what I was about to hear. There was a brief pause before her voice came through, shaky but clear. "I need to talk to you." I felt my stomach drop. The tight knot that had been building in my chest tightened even more. I didn't know if I was ready for this conversation. In fact, I didn't know if I ever would be. But I knew that avoiding it any longer would only make things worse. "Where are you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm at the apartment," she replied, the words hanging in the air between us. I need to explain everything. Please, just come." I didn't respond right away. The apartment. That's where she had gone, where she'd stayed the night. I knew that, in the back of my mind, but hearing her say it out loud was different. It made everything so much more real, so much more painful. It was a place she had built away from me, a place where she could be someone else, someone I didn't know. "I'll be there," I finally said, my voice thick with emotion. I wasn't sure if I was doing this to find closure, or if I was just too tired of the uncertainty to keep avoiding it. But something in me told me that I needed to face her. I needed to hear her side of the story, even if it didn't change anything. The drive to the apartment felt like the longest of my life. I couldn't think of anything except the fact that I was about to face the woman who had destroyed everything I had once believed in. The woman who had betrayed me in ways I hadn't even begun to comprehend. When I finally arrived, I sat in the car for a few moments, staring at the building in front of me. The windows were dark, and I couldn't see any movement. It looked like any other apartment building, but to me, it was a symbol of everything that had gone wrong, everything that had been shattered. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the car, my legs feeling heavier with each step I took toward the entrance. As I ascended the stairs, the knot in my stomach tightened, but I didn't stop. I knocked on the door. A moment later, Olivia opened it. She looked tired, her eyes red from crying. Her face was pale, and for the first time since everything had happened, I saw the vulnerability in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. She wasn't the confident, composed woman I had known. She was broken, and in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't the only one who had been hurt. She stepped aside to let me in, and I followed her into the small living room. The apartment was sparse, nothing like the home we had shared. It felt temporary, like a place that wasn't meant to be permanent. She sat down on the couch, and I remained standing, unsure of what to do with myself. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, her voice cracking. "I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to understand. I never meant to hurt you. I never wanted to betray you." I let her words hang in the air, not responding right away. What could I say? What was there to say? "How long?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "How long has this been going on?" She looked down, unable to meet my gaze. "A few months," she whispered. "It started when things between us started falling apart. I didn't know how to fix it, and I didn't know who else to turn to." I felt a surge of anger, but I swallowed it down. "So, instead of talking to me, instead of trying to work things out, you just turned to him?" She nodded, her eyes filled with shame. "I was lost. I thought I was doing what was best for us. I thought I was protecting you by not telling you. But I was wrong. I was selfish." Her words stung, but I didn't let her see how much they affected me. "You were selfish," I repeated, trying to keep the bitterness from creeping into my voice. You were selfish, and I was blind. I didn't see it. I didn't want to see it. I'm sorry, she said again, her voice barely more than a whisper. We sat in silence for a long time, neither of us knowing what to say next. The weight of her confession hung between us, suffocating the air. It wasn't just the affair that hurt. It was the years of emotional neglect, the months of pretending everything was fine, when it was falling apart right in front of me. I had trusted her with everything, and she had broken that trust. I didn't know how to move forward from that. I didn't know if I even wanted to. Finally, I broke the silence. So what happens now? She looked at me, tears in her eyes. I don't know. I don't know if we can fix this. I don't know if you can ever forgive me. But I can't lose you. I don't know what to do, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. Her words were desperate, but they weren't enough. Nothing she said could undo what had been done. The trust between us was shattered, and no apology could repair that. I had to ask myself if I could ever look at her the same way again, if I could ever trust her, love her, the way I once had. I didn't have the answer. But one thing was clear. The person I was before this, the person who believed in her, in us, was gone. And the man standing in front of her now was someone I didn't recognize either. You've already lost me, I said quietly, and I don't know if I can find my way back. The words I had spoken echoed in the room long after I said them. You've already lost me. I repeated in my head, but they felt like they were coming from someone else, someone who wasn't me. The man standing in front of her, cold and distant, wasn't the same person who had once loved her with everything he had. And yet, I couldn't seem to find a way back. Olivia didn't move. She didn't say anything for a long time. Her eyes, still red from crying, met mine with an expression I couldn't place: guilt, sorrow, desperation. She opened her mouth several times to speak, but didn't. She was frozen, waiting for a miracle, maybe waiting for me to change my mind. But I knew deep down that nothing could make me unsee what I had witnessed. Nothing could make me unfeel the betrayal that had cut through the very core of who I was. I didn't know what to do, she said, her voice barely audible. I thought if I could make it work, if I could figure out what went wrong, it would fix everything. But I couldn't. And now I've lost you. The rawness in her voice pierced something inside me. There was a part of me, the part that used to love her so fiercely, that wanted to reach out and comfort her. It was a reflex, a piece of the person I used to be. But I held myself back. That version of me was dead, buried under layers of lies and deceit. I walked across the room, my steps heavy, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. It wasn't anger that fueled me now. It was something much worse. It was the emptiness. It was the realization that the life I had built, the life I thought was perfect, was all an illusion. She wasn't the person I thought she was, and I wasn't the person I used to be. I don't know what to tell you, Olivia, I said, my voice rough with emotion. I want to be angry. I want to scream at you, but I don't even know how to feel anymore. This isn't just about the affair. This is about everything. The lies, the distance, the way you slowly slipped away from me without ever saying anything. I was right here, Olivia. I was right here, and you never gave me a chance to fix it. She flinched at my words, but I didn't care. She had already broken everything. Her tears, her apologies, they weren't enough anymore. They could never undo what had been done. I didn't know how to tell you, she whispered, her voice breaking. I was afraid you'd leave. I didn't want to lose you, but I lost you anyway. I turned to face her, a cold knot in my chest. You didn't just lose me, Olivia. You lost yourself. You lost everything that we built together. And I'm not sure I can ever trust you again. I don't know how to look at you without seeing him, without seeing the lies. There was a sharp intake of breath, and she collapsed onto the couch, her face buried in her hands as she sobbed. I stood there, unsure of what to do. I had expected her to beg, to plead with me to stay, to promise that things would change, that we could fix it. But she didn't. Instead, she just cried. She cried in a way that made me realize how much she had been carrying, how much guilt she was drowning in. It was strange, seeing her like this. The woman who had been so confident, so composed. The woman who had walked away from me without a second glance, who had been living this secret life, was now a broken shell of the person I had once known. The image of her in the apartment, wrapped up in someone else's arms, was still fresh in my mind. But now, I was faced with this, the raw, unfiltered version of her that I had never truly seen before. And it made me wonder, had she always been this way? Had I been so blind that I never saw the cracks in her armor? Or had those cracks always been there, just waiting to break open? The silence between us grew thick as she wept, and I felt like I was drowning in it. The weight of it was suffocating, pressing down on me, and for the first time in days, I thought about leaving everything behind. I didn't want to live in this house anymore, didn't want to feel the constant reminder of what she had done. But I couldn't bring myself to leave. "Olivia," I said, my voice quieter now, more resigned than anything else. "I don't know what you expect from me. I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I even want to forgive you. But I can't live like this. I can't pretend like everything is okay. I can't keep pretending that this life is what I thought it was." She lifted her tear-streaked face and looked at me, her eyes full of desperation. "Please, don't leave me," she whispered. "Please, I need you. I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." Her words were like a blade cutting deeper, but I couldn't let them reach me. I couldn't let myself be swayed by her pleas anymore. "You should have thought about that before," I said, my voice sharp but steady. "Before you decided to do this to me, to us." For a moment, she just stared at me, as if waiting for something. A response. A sign. But I couldn't give her that. I couldn't give her any false hope. There was no going back from this. There was no repairing what had been broken. "I need to leave," I said, turning to walk toward the door. "I need to get out of here. I can't keep doing this. I don't know if I can ever be the person I was again. I don't know if we can ever be who we were." I didn't look back as I left. I couldn't. I couldn't face her in that moment. Couldn't see the person she had become. The person I didn't recognize. As I walked out into the cool night air, I felt the weight of it all pressing on my chest. I had lost everything. But worse than that, I had lost myself. And I didn't know how to find my way back. I didn't know where to go from here, but I knew one thing for sure. Nothing would ever be the same. And the person I used to be, the person who had loved her with everything he had, was gone, lost in the darkness that now surrounded me. There was no going back from this. The days that followed felt like a slow, grueling walk through fog. I didn't know how to move forward, didn't know how to shake the weight of everything that had happened. Olivia's words still echoed in my head, but they no longer held the power they once did. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had been holding onto a version of her, a version of us, that no longer existed. And I had been too afraid to let go. But life doesn't stop for anyone, no matter how much they want it to. Work didn't stop. Friends didn't stop checking in, even though I couldn't bring myself to answer their calls. The world kept turning, and as much as I wanted to hide, as much as I wanted to wallow in my hurt, I knew deep down that I couldn't stay in that place forever. I started small. I went for walks in the park. I sat in cafes by myself, reading books I hadn't touched in years. It felt strange at first, being alone in a world that felt so alien, but in the quiet moments, I started to realize something. I was healing. Slowly. I hadn't let go of the pain completely, but I had started the process. And that, in itself, felt like a victory. Weeks passed. Olivia and I still hadn't spoken. There were texts, a few calls, but neither of us could bring ourselves to say the things that needed to be said. I had gotten to a place where I was no longer waiting for her to fix things, no longer waiting for her to make it right. I had begun to understand that only I could do that for myself. One day, as I was walking through the same park I'd visited so many times in the past month, I saw a familiar face. It was Mark, a friend from work. I hadn't seen him in ages, and he waved at me with that easy grin of his. "Hey man, you've been off the radar for a while. Everything okay?" he asked, his voice warm with concern. For a moment, I almost didn't know how to respond. How could I explain everything that had happened? How could I tell him that I had just been through something that had shaken me to my core? But then I realized that I didn't need to explain. "Yeah," I said, the word feeling foreign but true. "I'm doing all right. Just taking some time to figure things out." We ended up sitting on a bench, talking about everything and nothing, just like we used to. For the first time in weeks, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't a grand revelation. It wasn't some big moment of clarity. It was just a conversation between two old friends, but it was exactly what I needed. I realized that I wasn't alone in this. I had people who cared about me, people who hadn't abandoned me when everything seemed to fall apart. That evening, I sat down at my kitchen table, The same one where Olivia and I had shared so many meals, so many conversations. It felt strange to be there alone, but it also felt peaceful. I picked up my phone, debating whether or not to reach out to her. I still didn't know what to say, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep running from the past. Instead of texting Olivia, I made a decision that I had been avoiding for so long. I called a therapist. I needed help, and I was tired of pretending I didn't. I had spent so much time trying to fix things on my own, thinking I had to carry this burden alone, but I realized that wasn't the answer. I wasn't weak for seeking help. I was strong for finally admitting that I needed it. The first session was hard, painful even, but it was also freeing. Talking through my feelings, acknowledging the hurt, the betrayal, and even the loss, helped me see things from a different perspective. I didn't have all the answers yet, but for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. It was small, but it was there. Over time, Olivia and I did start talking again. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect. We both had so much to work through, so many walls to break down, so much to rebuild. But we didn't try to force it. We took it one step at a time. I realized that forgiveness didn't mean pretending nothing had happened. It didn't mean erasing the past. It meant accepting that things had gone wrong, but still choosing to move forward together, if that's what we both wanted. And it wasn't just about Olivia. It was about me, too. I learned that I could survive, that I could heal, that I could rediscover the person I had been before all of this. I didn't need to define myself by the mistakes of the past. I could choose a new path, a better one. Months passed, and things weren't perfect, but they were real. Olivia and I were learning to rebuild our trust, one conversation at a time. We were learning to be honest with each other, to communicate openly. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. And in those small, quiet moments, when we sat together, talking about our day, or laughing over a cup of coffee, I began to feel like I was finding my way back to the life I had lost. The healing wasn't linear, and I knew there would be days when I'd feel the sting of the past again, but I also knew that I had the strength to face it. I had learned that there was always room for growth, even in the darkest of times. And that, in the end, was the greatest victory. Not just finding my way back to her, but finding my way back to myself. We still had a long road ahead of us, but for the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid to walk it.